This is Bleach, an anime slash manga, a part of the Big Three. Ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna go over everything important inside Bleach. I'm talking about important characters, plots, and knowledge checks as well. Overall, this is going to be a spoiler video, so warning now. But this video is not only to ask you, is this video worth watching, but also to see how great the series is as a whole. It's gonna be a long one, and I would love to see what you think of Bleach in the comments down below. And plus, we'll do this for other animated series, so let me know what you want to see next. Finally, if you like this type of video, I would greatly appreciate it if you do subscribe. Now then, without further ado, let's talk about Bleach. So for those of you who do not want spoilers, there's a couple of things you need to know about Bleach. First of all, this is a series that started off in early 2000s, around 2001, and then the animated series came shortly after in 2004. If you are a hard Bleach fan, you know around 2013 there was a hiatus, which really sucked. But luckily enough, we did get a continuation, which is the 1,000-Year Blood War, which is also canon. So the series has been around for more than 20 years. And hell, Bleach is probably older than some of you watching this video today. Overall, the series follows a young kid named Ichigo Kurosaki who eventually becomes a substitute Soul Reaper. A Soul Reaper is someone that's able to govern the way that the afterlife works. Throughout the series, you'll see there's a lot of characters that have this black attire on. These are all Soul Reapers, and their job is mainly to make sure that people pass on. They don't necessarily believe in death, however, they do believe they play some type of role of making sure Hollows don't exist. And also Hollows, at which we may talk about later, are just bad people. All of them aren't really villains or antagonists, however, that's what the series describes them as. Again, our main character Ichigo Kurosaki eventually becomes a substitute Soul Reaper. His job is to make sure he can protect his hometown just in case monsters come along to disturb the peace. He just so happens to stumble across a real Soul Reaper who so happens to give him her power. And after that, the series kind of goes along with him being the substitute Soul Reaper. Now that's your general synopsis of what the show is. And again, if you're looking for a non-spoiler free should you watch, that's it. So again, spoiler warning, now we're gonna get into the deep stuff. When it comes to Bleach, there's a lot of characters that have different factions. The main groups we see are Soul Reapers, humans, and the Arankars, which are also known as Hollows. This group really takes up majority of the series because the world was split. So for majority of the series, we see our Soul Reapers fighting against other Hollows. That being said, there's really three huge arcs within Bleach, and I'm gonna talk about these the most because they play a huge part in the story. And those three would be the Soul Society arc, the Waco Mundo arc, and finally the 1,000-Year Blood War. Now let's just focus on the Soul Society arc just to start. As I've mentioned before in the spoiler-free portion of this video, Ichigo gets his powers from Rukia. Because of how the Soul Society works, it's a big no-no to give a human your power. Now mind you, later on, that we find out that Ichigo Kurosaki is a bit more than just a regular human, and you would assume that the Soul Society would know this, but whatever. Because of Rukia's action, she's sent back to the Soul Society to be sentenced to death. It's also crazy because her big brother comes to take her back. Imagine having your sibling choosing to take you to be executed. So the Soul Society arc follows one main story, and that's to rescue Rukia. Now we get several different important knowledge checks because of what's going on. The first one being is that the Soul Society is kind of corrupted. Majority of the Soul Reapers don't really do what they do because they feel a certain way. Instead, it's an order from top down, and that's how it's going to be. I mean, that's exactly why our character Byakuya takes Rukia away just to have her executed. It really doesn't matter if you're siblings, if you're somehow related by marriage, they do not care. Another truth about the Soul Society arc is there's a lot of characters that really don't care about what's going on. Our main character Ichigo not only takes some of his human friends to go help him out, but we're also introduced to Yoruichi and Kisuke, both being old Soul Reapers that don't follow the same rules. I mean, Kisuke was even willing to train Ichigo, hoping that he could do something. Yoruichi, on the other hand, was not only willing to teach them Bankai, but also willing to fight against the current Soul Reapers. Now it's pretty obvious that our main characters are going to be against the Soul Reapers. It's kind of the pro-tag against the antag, but there are also some characters characters that choose to not get involved very heavily, or they will straight up use the circumstances going on to their advantage. Now, before I talk about who I'm speaking of, let's also talk about what else happens within this arc. Another important thing that happens within this arc is the characters learn Bankai. Characters should be able to learn Shikai and Bankai in that respective order. This naturally will happen as a character, specifically a Soul Reaper, will get stronger. However, when they're trying to call amongst this power, they have to say the full name of their Zanpakuto. Now, our main character, Ichigo Kurosaki, is always in Shikai. He's just that much of a Chad, you know? However, later on, we see him learning the ability Bankai along with a new companion, Renji. Now, we don't find out till much later that Bankai can be a lot of different things besides just your sword changing. For example, during Ichigo's Bankai, both his blade and his clothing changes. Now, during his Bankai, his blade becomes a small, black, thin reaper. However, since Ichigo's clothes change as well, we find out that he actually wears his Bankai. As his clothes slowly becomes tattered, that's his Bankai technically running out. And there's a lot of other Bankais we see as well, such as Mayuri able to summon this huge baby-like creature. All Shikais and Bankai should have insanely unique abilities based on the user. And this is where a lot of the enjoyment for us viewers comes from, to figure out what characters have what abilities and what they can do with it. And as I say that, that also bleeds into our next big topic of the Soul Society arc, Aizen. Aizen, who originally showed up as a soft-spoken captain, becomes the main villain of Bleach. And it's kind of fire how he does it too. When you watch the full series, you find out that Aizen has been planning for years to betray the Soul Society. Aizen, Tozen, and Gin have worked together for years to plan out their attack. Because of all the commotion happening due to Ichigo invading the Soul Society, this is the best chance to start their plan. Aizen starts off by faking his own death so people would believe he is actually dead. Of course, he is a very mature captain and wouldn't get punked that easily. However, it brought a lot of suspicion to the other Soul Reapers of, did the invaders actually do this? And when it is finally time, we get to see that Aizen, Gin, and Tozen end up betraying the others. Now, it's not just that easy, because Aizen's ability is full hypnosis, and because of his ability, he was able to fake his death to a T. However, to successfully do it, he has to have others actually see and know his Zanpakuto ability. When he first showed off his Zanpakuto ability, he lied at what it could actually do. However, he could make that bluff because of the hypnosis ability. They believed it was true. So as you can assume, Aizen becomes one of the main focus points for our next arc. However, to also summarize what else we got within the Soul Society arc, we also got the fight between Ichigo and Byakuya. Now, at the end of the day, Byakuya is a tough cookie. He does not care if that's his sister or not. He is ready to watch her die on the cross. And at the end of the day, he stood on business too, even when it was about to be Rukia's final moments. However, Ichigo prepared for this not only to combat what Byakuya's thinking is incorrect, but also just to put him down in the dirt, which eventually does happen, but not because of Ichigo's own strength. Instead, we're shown a mask that Ichigo puts on his face when he was in danger. Not voluntarily, by the way. This mask represents a hollow mask that Ichigo's able to wear. And whenever Ichigo has it on, it not only protects him, but makes him stronger. Ichigo eventually ends up putting down Byakuya before ripping off the mask in a last-ditch effort. But shortly after, that's when Aizen jumps in to show off his amazing plan. So to give a synopsis of what happens here, the Soul Society does change, realizing that maybe you shouldn't just off people when sometimes the thing that may have happened is good. And this really sets up Ichigo to be accepted as a substitute Soul Reaper. But this arc also sets us up for the next big chunk, which is the Waco Mundo / Fake Karakura Town arc. Now, before we jump into that, let's just say that the Soul Society arc was an internal thing. We mainly focused on one faction here, which is the Soul Reapers. Now we're going to be adding in another faction, which is the Hollows, as well as some humans that are involved. So please be ready, because this is a bigger arc than the Soul Society arc. To start this arc off, we're introduced to two main things. The first one is Shinji, who is able to wear a hollow mask. Very similar to our protagonist Ichigo and what he did against the fight with Byakuya. However, Shinji shows that he has full control over using his hollow mask. We find out that Shinji was previously a Soul Reaper similar to Kisuke and Yoruichi. And because he has the ability to summon his mask at will, we can assume that Ichigo's going to learn how to do it as well. Also, a little bit later on, we have our first group showing up, which is the Espada. The Espada are high-leveled hollows that come to try to find Orihime. Now, we're first introduced to number 10, Yami, and number 4, Ukiura. These two characters come to the human world looking for Orihime in order of Aizen. Also, as I mentioned before, these are considered antagonists and could be considered villains. That being said, we find out later on that they're not always just doom and gloom. During this moment, we see a lot of things happen, such as Chad and Ichigo try to stop the Espada. The issue is they're just simply not strong enough. Even when Ichigo was inside his Bankai form, he still got rocked. And yet again, you had to have other characters come in to save the day. This proves to Ichigo that he not only needs to get stronger, but he also will get the help from Shinji and the other Visors. Visors are those who are able to put on a mask, by the way. And because of this situation and what's happening to Karakura Town, this means the Soul Reapers can now get involved. Throughout this series, we get to see multiple fights with different Soul Reapers against the Arrancars. Now, it may be a little bit confusing to hear different names such as Hollow, Arrancar, and Espada, but just take it as I said it. As you go up the ranks from Hollow, Arrancar, and Espada, you are the same being, but you're just getting stronger. Some Soul Reapers such as Rangiku and Ikaku get to go to the world of the living to help out, and there they get to test their mettle against various Arrancars. The thing is, there was also one other guy that showed up during this moment. This dude is an Espada. Grimmjow Jaggerjack is number 6 amongst the Espada. And during this moment, we have seen a total of 3 different Espada in which Ichigo still cannot beat. So these early stages are a preparation of what's going to happen next. And well, what happens next is Orihime chooses to leave. Now, before we jump into that, we do find out that Ichigo was doing his best to learn new abilities. Working with the other Visors was his best way to learn how to use his holification. However, if he did master the ability to use holification, would it be strong enough to beat these foes? Well, we're shown in earlier stages of his training, we get to see white Ichigo inside of his body. Initially, we believe that this is his holification form because that's what we see first. I mean, he also has the same white appearance that we get to see from the Hollow Mask. However, we find out more things later on. But without jumping too far in, now the Espada know what they want to get. Similar as before within the Soul Society arc, Aizen was able to get the Hogyoku from Rukia. But this time, Aizen was using the Espada to go and bring back Orihime. And I mean, Orihime does have some type of brain on her, no matter how much people slander her on Twitter. Orihime realized that her being around is a threat to other people within the world of the living. So she decides the best thing to do is to go ahead and leave. It's really sad too because she chooses to forfeit herself for her friends. Now mind you, her friends are willing to put their lives on the line to protect her. And that's exactly what happens when they go on a rescue mission to go retrieve Orihime. But it's also a lot of character growth to see that Orihime wants to be there with her friends and Ichigo. But she also understands that putting them out of harm's way is the best thing for now. So Orihime chooses to leave, and now we have the next portion, which is going to save her in Waco Mundo. Once Ichigo and friends get to Waco Mundo, they're quickly accompanied by another group of Hollows. Before I mentioned that not all Hollows are actually bad, and here's a great example of some Hollows that have no negative emotions in their body whatsoever. At first, the team mistakes these characters as being villains, so they decide to try to kill them. But very soon after, we're shown Nell and her friends have their own beef with the other Hollows. And plus, as they travel to get to the actual palace, they help Ichigo and friends out. Since Nell and the others become so attached to the game, they decide to tag along to try to stop the other Espada. Now once they get into the palace, that's a whole other scheme. At first, most of the characters have to test their mettle by fighting other Arrancars. These Arrancars are nowhere close to an Espada, however, they still give the team a run for their money. The first Arrancar that Ichigo has to fight forces him to put on his Hollow Mask to win. Now I guess at the end of the day he won, yeah, that's great, but this fight also shows that his Bankai clearly was not strong enough. Luckily enough for the team, these fights do start off with their Arrancar so they could at least get their feet wet. However, as soon as the next wave of Espada start coming in, it's a complete different story. As the Espada start to roll in, we see a lot of them that have really low numbers, such as Nortra, who has number 5, or Xyloporo that has number 8. Because our heroes have to split off, they all get to fight their own Espada respectively. And we can for sure say that none of them were strong enough to beat an Espada. It's really quite sad to be honest, especially when Ichigo gets to fight Ukiura. Believing that Ukiura is much stronger than everyone else here, he realizes pretty soon that he's only number 4. And plus, Ukiura beats Ichigo pretty easily without having to use his true power. Meanwhile, Orihime is actively getting stomped on by jealous Arrancars. During this moment, it's supposed to look very dire for us as an audience. I mean, if Ichigo's not able to beat even number 4, let alone harm him, then we know for a fact 3 and above is much higher. But at the same time, it is lucky for Ichigo because he does catch a break. Number 6, Grimmjow Jaggerjack is just so petty. Wanting to actually kill Ichigo for himself, he is able to seal away Ukiura and revive Ichigo. Now the way he actually revives him is thanks to taking away Orihime using her power. And honestly, thinking of his plan, this was a huge fumble if your goal was just to get rid of these characters. But nonetheless, Orihime ends up reviving Ichigo, so now Ichigo gets to fight Grimmjow. Ichigo also realizes that yet again he has to use his Hollow Mask to fight Grimmjow. If he could barely beat an Arrancar with it, then he might as well put it on. But this is also a tough scenario because Orihime has never seen his Hollow Mask. And to her, it looks like a threat. Matter of fact, it looks like it's literal danger. Don't forget that people that have been harassing her and kidnapped her also wear Hollow Mask as well. So to see the person that's supposed to be protecting you wearing a full Hollow Mask is kind of grim. However, she has to get over it and she has to realize that it's still Ichigo under the mask. It's a pretty simple but yet very still effective concept. And at this moment, we're treated with probably one of the best fights of the series. This is a fight at which I just simply don't like you and you don't like me. I also want to call out characters such as Ukiura and Grimmjow have amazing character design. If this show wasn't about Soul Reapers, maybe Grimmjow and Ukiura could have had their own side story. But nonetheless, this fight ends by Grimmjow having to hold this L. Shortly after the fight against Grimmjow and Ichigo, the other Soul Reapers join in. Specifically, 3 Captain level Soul Reapers are now a part of the fight. Mayuri, Byakuya, and Kenpachi all come over to Waco Mundo to help fight. You can take this as a thank you as to what Ichigo and his gang did back in the Soul Society arc. Also, the group doesn't really care about Aizen anyway, so this is the best time to get him out of the picture. Mayuri ends up helping Uryu fight, which becomes a scientist versus scientist thing. Kenpachi gets involved helping out Ichigo, at which he also saves his life, and plus it's an easy cakewalk for him anyway. On the other hand, Byakuya helps defeat Aranero while saving his sister at the same time. Here we get to see these 3 captains are much stronger than they were back in the Soul Society arc. 2 of them also band together to help fight Yami later on, who we find out his actual number is 0. I will not lie though, just to intervene, Yami was a disappointment as an Espada. Meanwhile, Ichigo is getting his second fight against Ukiura. Ukiura takes him to a place called Las Noches. There, he's able to use both of his awakenings because he's not permitted to do so within the actual palace. Now this makes you think that Ukiura may be strong, however he might be even stronger than the other Espada above him. During this fight, there's a lot of stuff that happens. First and foremost, Ichigo was just not strong enough to beat Ukiura. After getting mollywopped throughout the whole fight, we find out that Ichigo is actually killed this time. While Uryu is up there trying to help, it doesn't matter because he's not even as strong as Ichigo. And also at this time, Orihime is not able to save him. However, this is where White jumps in. You see, White once told Ichigo that if you actually die, I will take your place, so you better not. And this is where Ichigo's new form, the Vasta Lourdes, shows up. The Vasta Lourdes form is not controlled by Ichigo, instead it is controlled by White. And during this time, White obliterates Ukiura. And I mean, it's pretty rough too. White literally rips him apart. Now this moment does act as quote-unquote plot because Ichigo technically did lose. And after he comes back to his senses, he's just completely healed. Of all the fights that Ichigo has been a part of, this is the one that was the most embarrassing, and he probably felt the same way. But we also see a moment that Orihime shows sympathy for Ukiura. Now as a viewer, it's kind of hard to understand why she even cares about a guy that literally kidnapped her. But if you do a deep dive into Bleach and what each character symbolizes, you find out that Ukiura stands for nihilism, which basically means that there is no meaning to life. It kind of shows in Ukiura's design why he has the green tears rolling down his eyes. Ukiura never understood what the meaning of his creation was, and maybe he started to see a point when he had Orihime around. A character that really didn't even fight back when she was kidnapped. We could argue that Ukiura had a lot more character development if Vasta Lourdes did not stop him prematurely. Unfortunately, in the future arcs, we would probably never see this character yet again. On the other side of the spectrum, we have several fights happening within the Fake Karakura town. Aizen, Tozen, and Gen all travel there to start their plan. However, amongst a rival, they're greeted by a lot of the other Soul Reapers and captains. I mean, even the head captains here ready to throw down. That being said, each side has their own tricks up their sleeve. The first being is that Aizen actually has the other top 3 Espada along with him. Holybale, Baragon, and Stark all join the fight. On the other side, the head captain puts a flame veil around the main 3, therefore they can't participate in the fight. Now honestly, could they have broken this veil? I honestly think they could have, but nonetheless the top 3 Espada, including their Arrancars, have to fight this one out. To interject for another second here, I must also say that the top 3 Espada were very bad. When you look at the other fights that have Grimmjow or Ukiura, the top 3 don't seem as strong as they should have been. I can give Baragon a pass because it took a captain to use her whole Bankai, including a visor, to get involved. However, Holybell never beat anybody, and she actually got defeated by Aizen later on. On the other side, Stark had a fight against 2 captains that were probably the strongest amongst the bunch. However, they never used their Bankai. They only ever had to use their Shikai and kind of came out unscathed. Well, that is, especially when the other two visors got involved. Overall, I will say that these three Espada were really kind of poor in design. I mean, they should have been able to push their opponents a little bit more than they actually did. But nonetheless, they all have their respective fights, and two of them have some really cool abilities, but that's not Hollybell. But as I softly mentioned before, it starts to get dire, so the visors get involved. Now the visors have their own story because they were all once Soul Reapers, and they have seemingly been exiled from the Soul Society because of the situation of them having hollow powers. The question is, why? It wasn't by choice, and all of them have a very strong hatred against Aizen because of it. But why is it that they lose their jobs because of something like this happening? That's a fumble, I'm gonna be honest with you. Nonetheless, the visors do come to help out the fight, assisting the Soul Reapers. Once the top three Espada are finally put down, it's finally time for Tozen, Gin, and Aizen to do what they have to do. First, the head captain gets to fight against Wonderwise. Wonderwise might not be at the same level as an Espada, but he is specifically made to stop the head captain. And you guessed it, he did not stop the head captain. So moving right along to something more important, Tozen also gets to fight. Of the main three antagonists, you see Tozen has a lot more he can do that we didn't think about. Of course, he is a Soul Reaper and he has a Shikai and a Bankai, which we've seen. But we also see now he also has holification abilities. And something about his holification makes it look much more darker than the other characters. Of course, he does not have a face on his actual mask, but it looks a little bit more demonic. Also, this character is blind if you have not noticed, and he finally gets the vision that he always wanted. Now one day I believe we will look into the series The Can't Fear Your Own World that talks more about Tozen. But because this character has always been blind, he's never gotten to see, well, what you could see. He has always seen things as beautiful even though he does not have vision. But soon as he has the ability to see, he calls someone that he once seen as beautiful now ugly. It's honestly an amazing backstory that we don't get to see enough about in Bleach. But nonetheless, he is killed here, and one day I hope we're talking more about Tozen's backstory. In the meantime, we also get Aizen doing Aizen things, in which he shows that he has everyone hypnotized to believe Momo is actually him. It's honestly one of the most goated plays I've ever seen in my life. Ichigo realized it because he was never under the hypnosis of his Zanpakuto. But because every other character is currently underneath the hypnosis, they never realized that they were attacking Momo. It's so fire because he takes out about 4 captains all at once. And even then, when Aizen has other characters show up such as Kisuke and Yoruichi, he still has other abilities. Aizen shows off that he's been fused with the Hogyoku. In other words, he has more abilities that you cannot understand. Now, even though characters such as Yoruichi, Kisuke, and even Ichigo's dad get involved, this is another situation that they were obviously handicapped. I mean, the amount of bankais that they're currently trying to hide from characters is kind of mass. And honestly, I wouldn't mind them showing at least one of these characters trying to use their ability. It is cool to see that Ichigo's dad is actually a Soul Reaper, that's great, but he never even used his awakening. Yoruichi was wearing these stupid contraptions to make her hit harder. It just really didn't make a lot of sense, I'll be honest. But nonetheless, Aizen does win this fight and gets to keep going on. And at this moment, Gin does his best to show off that he was never on Aizen's side, because you know, of all moments, this is just the best moment to die. Aizen says that he always knew that Gin was going to go against him, and well, Gin is killed here. It's just another waste of a death. But here, now it's all up to Ichigo, one of the only characters that's not been shown what Aizen's ability is. And now, not only Ichigo has to find out his true self, but he also has to learn Muigetsu, which of course you know he does because that's the power of a protagonist. After coming to understand one side of his crazy abilities, he learned Mugetsu. Basically, it's his final trump card that can erase anyone that's in front of him. He first started off the fight by beating up Aizen, showing that it's a no diff. And honestly, he didn't probably need to use the final attack if he didn't want to, but for the sake of just showing off that he can do it and he can beat any character he needs to, they have him do it. And Aizen is destroyed. Now, we don't know 100% of everything what Aizen wanted to do. We understand the purpose of Aizen getting the Hogyoku was so he could become a greater being. Most likely so he could replace the Soul King. He probably had other agendas as well, such as branching the world of the living and the Soul Society, as well as Waco Mundo. But as I mentioned before, there is a third piece, which is the 1,000-Year Blood War. And during this story, we're going to get a lot more information of what Aizen wanted to do. However, at the time I'm currently making this video, that's still being animated. And you know, we're already pretty long as is, so we might stop here. These are the main arcs of Bleach, which are the Soul Society arc and the Fake Karakura town arc. There's other small things here and there, however, that's the general sense of how it goes. And once the 1,000-Year Blood War arc is finished, we will come back for a part 2 to this series. But for now, we're going to stop here. So if you are a fan of Bleach, or even if you're new to Bleach, let me know what you think of this series. And if you're looking for more Bleach content, I have something for you over here. But again, thank y'all for watching. I greatly appreciate it. Until next time, take care.